When working with Tableau, it is a very common requirement for data analysts to need to combine data from a number of different sources. Now, there are a number of ways of achieving this. One of the ways is to do this outside of Tableau itself. So depending on the complexity of requirements and the scale of data integration, you may leverage a system such as a data warehouse or big data solution such as Hadoop, and then use one of these systems as a source of data for a Tableau workbook. The other option is to use scripting tools such as R or Python, and then write some scripts to prepare the data for use in Tableau. You can create either flat files to be consumed by Tableau, or using Python and Tableau API, you can actually create extracts, so Tableau format. Now, in a situation where this is not practical or cost efficient, you can use Tableau itself to perform the integration task. And there are really two main methods in Tableau that allow us to combine the data. So we can either use joins to combine it at the data source level, or we can use what Tableau refers to as blending of data, which is at combining the data at the workbook level. So let's show you how this is done. We can start with a new workbook and click on Connect to Data. We'll use the same sample file, Microsoft Excel Superstore data file. And from our previous lectures and exercises, we know that this file has 3 different sheets. It's got orders, returns, and users. And we'll use these to demonstrate how to join data. So let's drag orders onto our main area, and we'll also drag returns. And you can see that Tableau automatically creates a join between these two objects or these two sets. Now, Tableau will make certain assumptions based on the underlying data. For example, if you actually click on a join, it's found that there's an order ID field in both orders and returns, and because the field is the same name, it's using that to join across the sets, which in this case is correct, but possibly you may have different names, so you might actually have to specify the joining column yourself. The other thing it made an assumption about is that we want an inner join. Inner join, as you can see by the little icon, it actually looks at intersection between the two sets. So it will only give us orders for which there are returns, but this is not necessarily what we want. We may want a left outer join, which will include all values in the left table that may or may not have values in the right table. So in this case, it's all the orders, regardless whether they have a return or not. Now, what this demonstrates is that you actually need a good understanding of your underlying data. If we were to leave those defaults that Tableau suggested, we would not include the whole data set. So obviously that will impact the analysis that you're trying to do in your data visualization. So let's leave the rest as is, and we'll go to the worksheet. Okay, so we still have a single data source, but that data source has 2 tables, has orders and returns. So the fields are organized into groups or tables, and depending on from which source it comes from. If there is a field that's actually in both, for example, order ID, it will be suffixed with the source. In one of those instances, it will be suffixed with the source where it comes from. Now, you can have a number of joins in your data source. If you go back to the orders, you can have a number of joins in your data source. So, for example, if we were to drag in users, again, Tableau creates an automatic join. In this case, the inner join is correct because it brings all the data back. If making it a left join doesn't really make a difference. This means that every single order has to have at least one user. Again, this kind of demonstrates having to know your data. And you have a large number of joins in your data connection, or in the data source, in your data source. But there is a practical limit to it. The more complex your source query gets, the slower it will get. And also there's a higher likelihood that your joins will not function properly, and it may cause data to either double up or potentially disappear. A second method for combining data using Tableau is using a method Tableau refers to as data blending. Data blending is combining two or more data sources within Tableau workbook itself. So this will happen in situations where we need to get data from two completely different data source types. So for example, we might need to combine data from Oracle financials, such as actual sales information, for example, and we need to combine it with forecasting data that comes from a spreadsheet. In this case, the quickest way to do this would be using data blending within Tableau itself. Now let's have a look at the example. So again, we'll use our trustworthy sample file and connect to it. This will represent our actuals. So we'll drag orders on there and maybe give it a more meaningful name. We said it's going to be actuals. So we won't change any other details. Go to workbook. Now we can see that our actuals in here, dimension measures as expected. Potentially we might want to analyze sales by region. Okay, and now if we were to compare these actual sales with target sales, which sit in a different source, we need to bring that source into our workbook and blend it with the actuals. So to do that, we will go back to connect to data. In our case, we actually created a little Superstore sales targets spreadsheet, which is available for you to download. So let's click on open. Now the sheet name has a terrible name, so we'll rename that to targets. And let's rename the whole data source to targets. Now you can see it's very simple. It's got region, year, and target sales. That's about it. So let's go back to worksheet. Now, a few things have happened here. We have two sources of data. We have actuals and targets. Actuals have a little blue tick right next to that, which indicates that the fields from the actuals are actually being used in the data visualization at the moment. And target measures are not. Now we can see also that next to the region field in a target source, we have a little linking icon. What this indicates is that this field region will be used to link our targets back to the primary data source, which is actuals. So what Tableau has done is recognize that both targets and actuals have a region field and assume that it's the same type of field, and it's the same type of data, and decided to use that as a linking field. Now, in our case, that's correct, but this may not be correct always. But you get to control that via going to data, edit relationships, and you can actually specify how different sources are connected or linked to each other within the workbook. So in this case, our primary source actuals is linked to the secondary data source targets via automatic link based on the region field, but we can actually go into custom mode and we can remove that link and add our own. So in this case, region actually was correct, so let's just add it back in. So using region. Okay, so what that means is that I can now drag target sales onto our data visualization and compare with the actual sales that come from the actuals data source. So we can see now how we can combine two different measures from two different sources into one visualization. We achieved that using data blending. So this chart here now shows us actual sales against target sales across a number of regions. However, if we were to actually look at this data across years, because we should be able to do that because we have a year in our targets as well, we might get some interesting results. So let's have a look. At that. So from our actuals, I'm going to drag the order date up into my columns shelf, so I can get a year based on the order date going across. And just to make it a little bit more, looking a little bit better, I'll drag regions down to the rows. So I can see now across years and across regions, actual sales versus targets. Now I can see something funny happening here. I can see that the target sales are actually same going across different years. In 2010, target sales for central region is about 3 million. Same in 2011, same in 2012, and so forth. You can actually see that it's different across regions, but not across years. To see this slightly better, we can actually go right-click on the sheet and duplicate the sheet as a cross tab, which actually shows us the details in actual numbers. And yes, we can see that it's the same number going across, but different number going down. Now, the reason for this is because the actuals and targets are linked only via region. So Tableau will know to split the measures from both of those data sets across regions when we're doing our analysis and when we're doing our data visualization. However, the year in targets is not linked to any particular field in the actuals. So therefore, when it comes to targets, targets are aggregated up to the highest possible level. In this case, it's region. And then that same number is split across different dimensions coming from the actuals data set. Now, to fix this, if we go to Edit Relationships and change it to Custom, if there was a year dimension in the actuals, we could actually link it back to the targets. However, in this case, it's based on this year up here. It's actually based on the order date, and because order date is a lower level of granularity, it's a date field, it actually can't be matched to anything in the targets. So what we have to do in this case is actually create a calculated field based on the order date, and we will call that field year, and it will be based on a formula year, which basically extracts the year part out of the date type field. And we'll click on OK. Now we have a year in targets. In the actuals, because that formula returns back the integer field or a numeric field, Tableau assumes it should be a measure. However, it's actually a dimension, so we'll move it across. And now what we should be able to go is go to our data and edit relationships, and we'll add year and link it to a year. So at the moment, so it used to be just regions, now we're adding year as well. So we'll click OK. And then in our targets, we actually need to go through and actually click on the link button or link icon. And once we do that, we can actually see now that the target sales have now been split across the common dimension, which is a year. And we can see that the numbers are changing from year to year as well as from region to region. Now, something to keep in mind is that this linking is only now applied against this worksheet. Like if you go back to the sheet 1, we still have an issue with numbers being replicated across years. So in that case, again, we have to go back to the actual linking field and say that it is to be used for linking. It's a slight quirk, I guess. In one way, you would expect that once you set up the linking between the data sources to work across all sheets, but I suppose if you had a number of sheets where they are set up a certain way, you may not want them to change. So just something to keep in mind.